It starts with flashing lights in your rearview mirror. You feel your chest tighten, your grip on the steering wheel gets just a little stronger, and suddenly, every small decision feels like it could change everything. You pull over, the engine is still running, your heart is racing, and then the officer steps out of the patrol car, slowly, deliberately, watching you the entire time. Most people think the danger is the stop itself, but in many cases, the real danger begins the moment you start talking. Because one wrong sentence, one unnecessary answer, one nervous explanation can turn a routine stop into something much worse. And here's what almost no one tells you. There is one simple phrase, a single, legally grounded sentence that, when used correctly, can often make officers wrap things up faster, reduce unnecessary questioning, and keep you protected under the law. But here's the part that shocks most drivers. Almost nobody uses it. And even worse, some people unknowingly say the exact opposite, making the situation longer, more complicated, and sometimes even legally risky. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been pulled over and said something you later regretted? Tell me in the comments. Because what you're about to hear could completely change how your next traffic stop goes. And it starts with understanding something most people misunderstand from the very beginning. When an officer approaches your vehicle, it may feel like a casual interaction, but under U.S. law, it's not. In many cases, a traffic stop is considered a temporary detention under the Fourth Amendment. That means your freedom is already limited, even if you haven't done anything wrong. And this is where things take a turn. Because during this detention, officers are allowed to ask certain questions related to the reason for the stop. Things like your license, registration, proof of insurance. That's normal. That's expected. But then, something subtle happens. The questions start to shift. Where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Have you had anything to drink tonight? And this is where most people make a critical mistake. They start talking. They explain. They try to be helpful. They think, if I just cooperate more, this will go faster. But here's what most people don't realize. Those extra questions, in many cases, they are not legally required for you to answer. And your answers can be used against you. Not because you're guilty, but because human beings are imperfect. We misspeak. We contradict ourselves. We say things that sound suspicious, even when they're not. And once that happens, the stop can expand. More questions, more scrutiny, more time, and sometimes more consequences. So now the real question becomes, how do you protect yourself without escalating the situation? How do you remain respectful without giving up your rights? And this is where that one phrase comes in, a phrase that is simple, calm, legally grounded, and incredibly effective when used correctly. The phrase is, I prefer not to answer any questions. That's it. No attitude, no confrontation, no arguments, just a calm, clear statement. I prefer not to answer any questions. And here's why this works. Under the Fifth Amendment, you have the right to remain silent. Courts have generally held that you must clearly invoke that right. Not aggressively, not defensively, but clearly. And this phrase does exactly that. It tells the officer, you understand your rights, you are choosing to exercise them, and you are doing so respectfully. But here's where things get interesting, because how you say it matters just as much as what you say. If you say it with attitude, you create tension. If you say it aggressively, you escalate the situation. But if you say it calmly, steady voice, relaxed posture, it sends a completely different signal. It shows control, it shows awareness, and in many cases, it discourages unnecessary questioning because the officer now knows you're not going to volunteer information that extends the stop. And this is where things often move faster. But here's what most people don't realize. Using this phrase doesn't mean you refuse everything. You still comply with lawful orders. You still provide required documents. You still follow instructions. This isn't about resisting. It's about protecting. And there's a difference, a big one. Because courts have consistently emphasized, there's a line between asserting your rights and obstructing an officer, and crossing that line can create serious problems. So the goal is balance, respectful, calm, clear. And this is where things take another turn, because many people think, if I stay silent, Won't that make me look guilty? And that fear is exactly what leads people to talk, to explain, to overshare. But under U.S. law, silence alone is not proof of guilt. In many cases, courts have recognized that individuals have the right to decline answering questions, and exercising that right does not automatically justify further detention. But here's the catch, and this is critical. The officer can still continue the stop based on the original reason. If you were speeding, they can process that. If there's a valid reason for further investigation, they may proceed. But your silence doesn't give them new information to expand the situation unnecessarily. And that's the key. You're not making things worse. You're simply not making them more complicated. And what happens next is where most drivers are surprised. Because in many cases, when there's no additional information, no inconsistent statements, no unnecessary details, the stop stays simple, focused, short, and often ends faster than expected. But here's something else. Something almost nobody talks about. Your body language. Because even if you say the right phrase, your actions can send the wrong message. If you're fidgeting, avoiding eye contact, moving suddenly, that creates suspicion, not legally, but psychologically. And officers are trained to observe behavior. So the goal is consistency, calm voice, steady movements, hands visible, nothing sudden, nothing dramatic. Because when your words and your actions align, you create clarity. And clarity reduces tension. And reduced tension often leads to quicker outcomes. But here's where things take an unexpected twist. Because sometimes, even when you do everything right, the officer may continue asking questions. They may repeat. They may rephrase. And this is where most people break. They think, maybe I should just answer this one. And that's how it starts. One answer becomes two becomes a conversation, and suddenly, you're explaining things you never needed to explain. So what do? You stay consistent, calmly, respectfully. I prefer not to answer any questions. No escalation, no change in tone, just consistency. Because consistency shows intention, and intention shows awareness. And awareness changes how the interaction unfolds. But there's one more layer to this, and it's something that can completely shift your perspective. Not every officer is trying to trap you. Not every question is a trick. In many cases, they're simply doing their job. But the legal system is built on structure, on rights, on protections. And understanding those protections doesn't make you difficult. It makes you informed. And informed people make better decisions under pressure. And that's what this is really about. Not winning, not arguing, not outsmarting anyone, but staying protected while staying respectful. And when you combine those two things, something powerful happens. The interaction becomes predictable, controlled, less emotional, less risky, and often shorter. But here's the part that stays with most people, long after the stop is over. It's not what the officer said. It's not the flashing lights. It's not even the ticket. It's the moment they realize, I didn't have to say all that. And that realization comes too late. So the real question is, what will you do differently next time? Will you talk because it feels easier in the moment? Or will you stay calm, stay respectful, and use the one phrase that keeps you protected? Because in situations like this, it's not about saying more, it's about saying less, with purpose. And that can make all the difference. If this opened your eyes, subscribe, because the more you understand your rights, the more control you have in moments that matter. And share this with someone who drives every day, because one simple sentence could save them from a situation they never saw coming. Because in the end, it's not the flashing lights that define the situation. It's not the badge. It's not even the questions. It's you, your decisions, your words, your control in a moment where most people lose it. And here's what stays with people long after the stop is over. It's not the ticket they remember. It's the feeling. That moment of replaying everything in their head. I shouldn't have said that. I talked too much. I made it worse. And that feeling is what this entire conversation is meant to prevent. Because understanding your rights isn't about being difficult. It's about being prepared. It's about knowing exactly where the line is and never accidentally stepping over it. And that one simple phrase, I prefer not to answer any questions. It does something powerful. It slows everything down. It removes unnecessary risk. It keeps the interaction focused on what actually matters. Nothing more, nothing extra. And in many cases, that's exactly what makes the stop end faster. But here's the truth most people don't hear until it's too late. You don't rise to the level of the situation. You fall to the level of your preparation. And a traffic stop is not the time to figure things out for the first time. It's the time to rely on what you already understand. So the next time those lights flash behind you, and your heart starts racing, and your mind goes blank for a split second, you won't panic. You won't overshare. You won't guess. You'll know exactly what to do. Stay calm, stay respectful, stay in control. And when the moment comes, you'll say less, but you'll say it with purpose. And that changes everything. If this made you think differently, subscribe. Because the more you understand these moments before they happen, the more confident you become when they do. And share this with someone who drives every day. Because one sentence, one decision, one moment of control can change the entire outcome of a situation they never expected to face.